Time to talk some Chiefs, you guys. Welcome to the Chief of the North on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, a Minnesota Chiefs fan, or the Chief of the North. And soon many of you might be Chiefs fans in the North because there's a football game coming to Minneapolis on Sunday. I'll be there. I'm excited. It should be a lot of fun. Never been to that particular stadium before. And from everything I'm hearing, lots of Chiefs fans are attending. So hopefully I get a chance to say hi to some of you. And I promise I'll have a haircut by then. A lot has happened since we last met and did this. As you know, every week, every Tuesday, we try to talk about some of the things that I'm writing about on the Chief of the North newsletter, some things that stood out to me in the last game, as well as answer some mailbag questions, not necessarily in any of that order. I'm going to talk a little bit about Isiah Pacheco. I want to talk a little bit about pass protection. I think a lot of things have been talked about with regards to wide receivers, but I want to kind of maybe provide a little context and perspective for the offensive performance as a whole against the Jets. A lot of people are worried about that this week, maybe understandably so. But I think there might be a few things that we can point out and that might help people relax a little bit, or at the very least give us reasons for why some of the struggles we saw aren't necessarily things that are going to continue moving forward, with the exception of a few that I am actually worried about. But we'll get to all that. First, as always, let's take a look at some mailbag questions. As you can tell, I am not at 100%, but it's going to be all right. So every week, you put your comments, put in the comment section some mailbag questions you have, put a question mark before or after it so I can hunt it down a little bit easier. And I'll always try to prioritize those and get to them first. So let's get to those mailbag questions from last week. Keep in mind, this would have, some of these, or all of them mostly, would have been before the Jets game. Let's take a look here. Lead Rest Steven. I'm doing that wrong. 6634 says, Seth K, what's up? What's up? Question on defense. Which group would you say is performing the strongest? Defensive line, linebacker, core, or secondary? I'd say so far in the season, it's probably been the secondary. I think the defensive line has had its moments, but they really do lack a second star outside of Jones. I know people are talking about George Karlaftis' pressure numbers, and I'm actually a big fan of pressure numbers. However, his wins come just slowly enough with some frequency that he's not converting quite as many of those into really heavy pressures or hits or sacks as much as I'd like. He's a good complementary pass rusher, but not quite another dude. Whereas in the secondary, I think they've got multiple dudes, if that makes sense. But that's the position group that I think is performing the strongest right now. The question from Tyrion Strongjaw is, why have the KC moves gone so under the radar? You see the draft moves from the Eagles, and they're being praised beyond belief, and I'm not disagreeing. But I mean, we're operating the youngest defense in the league. Why isn't KC getting the draft defense credit? I think when, generally speaking, the NFL news cycle works in two ways, okay? One is the instant, immediate overreaction, and then there's also the slow burn underreaction. And what I mean by that is every week we usually pick out, as fans, 3 or 4 things that we overreact to in one given game. The NFL coverage as a whole usually reacts to 1 or 2 things throughout the week, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. Well, usually not less than 1. But anyway, and so what can end up happening when things are happening that aren't expected necessarily, it can take the news cycle a while to catch up, and it's got to be shown time after time after time after time. And I think that's where the Chiefs defense is right now, which, by the way, they only gave up 18 points to the Jets. The Jets are a bad team with a bad offense, but on the 2 drives where they gave up touchdowns, one was a short field, and on both of them, Zach Wilson played out of his mind. And not in like the Chiefs helped him play out of his mind. He made some incredible throws. And that's something that I've actually gone out of my way to note to people, that I really wasn't mad at the defense with their performance. It's like, oh, it's Zach Wilson. Don't pay attention to the name on the back of the jersey. Look and see how they're playing. There's a difference between a quarterback being allowed to do things and being given wide open looks, or, whatever, all day in the pocket, that sort of stuff, and a quarterback just making great throws. And if a quarterback is making a great read and a great throw, it doesn't matter what the name on the back of the jersey is. That's not really a defensive failure, but an offensive success. It's always worth noting the difference between those two things. and overcoming our inherent biases and how we gauge those things. So anyway, that's just to say, I think the defense again played quite well. And I think it's going to just need to be multiple weeks of this before people are going to really sit up and take notice. I think when Charles Omenihu is back, I think that's going to help a great deal as well. Because one thing you could see against a good Jets offensive line that seems to be pretty well coached, you could see that they need another dude in that pass rush. They've got a good pass rush right now, I think, with Chris Jones as a superstar and complementary pieces. But I don't think they're quite at that level of a great one yet to where they're going to be quite as capable of consistent pressure against higher quality competition. I think it'll still be some pressure, but it'll depend on Spags winning and that sort of thing. So I just think I would just give it a little bit of time. The Churchill asks, if Tony has a career arc similar to Gronk, incredible when healthy, not consistently healthy, would that be worth it to keep him on the roster? I mean, with Gronk, that's a tough comparison, right? Because Tony hasn't shown anything that you would have to see Tony performing like at Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson levels when he's healthy. And so far he hasn't. It's been more of a niche type role. We'll see as the season moves along if they think that he can do more than what he's done. They talked about it a lot as the plan, but that's as much mental as it is physical in Andy Reid's offense. So we'll see whether they think he can do those things that are necessary in terms of sight adjustments and running traditional routes. So I think it would just depend on price. And lacking availability is one of the biggest problems you can have in a player. Now, one thing that they've done with, say, Jet McKinnon, who has struggled with availability throughout his career, is they keep him, and you can do this when you're the Chiefs. Not every team has this luxury. And it's also more of a luxury with your RB2 or RB3, where you can keep his snap counts real low, keep the contact real low, and you're going to see those numbers pump up again in December, January, and February for McKinnon, where I'm guessing it'll be almost exclusively Pacheco and McKinnon at that point. So I think it would depend on cost. And I think with Tony, it would only be worth it if it's a low cost, because you can really only get away with that if it's like your wide receiver 4. Or something that's the equivalent to an RB2. Let's make sure. Sherry Street asks, will Charles Omenihu start when he comes back week 7? Yes, I'm almost certain that he will. I do think that Karlaftis and Mike Dana are making it interesting along with FAU, but Omenihu was a better player than either Karlaftis or Dana last year. He wasn't a full-time player there, though, last year. So it'll be interesting to see how they rotate him in. But I do think he's going to be able to do some things. I think he'll probably be the second best player on that defensive line. What game do you see Tony going off? This is still Sherry. Me personally, I want to see it against the Dolphins. That would be hilarious. So sure, I'll pick that one too. Ryan White. Seth, I think we heard the entire intro to this one. Nice one. Hey, hopefully I didn't mess it up this week. Yeah. So, man, a lot of mailbag questions this week. A lot of hypotheticals here. This is from KGHD. But imagine a scenario where the Chiefs offense by the end of the season isn't top 5. We don't win the Super Bowl. Tony can't stay healthy. Sky doesn't take the second-year leap. MVS and Watson are okay. Travis starts to show signs of slowing down, etc. What do you think we do to address the wide receiver room next season? Could we land someone like T. Higgins if he parts ways with the Bengals? Trade up with the draft for a wide receiver? Thanks for their great content, Seth. Appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words. I think no matter what we see play out the rest of the season, I think the Chiefs are going to spend a round 1 or a round 2 pick on a receiver. And I think until they land a genuine blue chip type guy, I think that's probably what they're going to do. I think some of it's going to depend on Rashee Rice, but even if Rashee Rice really develops very, very well into a legitimate, wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 1 type guy, I think they're still going to want more and more weapons because they've seen how that benefits them. Let's see. I'm just double checking. I wholeheartedly. Ryan White just is commenting on the power of the media and the words that people can, the things that people can have, and he compared it to the Juju Smith-Schuster play in the Super Bowl, and with all the commentary about that, how it really does create a narrative. You can almost become part of the story by creating the story with what you say about the story, and that's just really worth noting. Man, you guys had so many mailbag questions. I'm going to get to a couple more here. I'll get to all of them. I think I promised that I always will. KL368 says, I've been looking at PFF defensive grades for the Chiefs and noticed Josh Williams is second in coverage grade overall and first in tackling among defensive backs. Is this PFF smokescreen or have you seen something on film? I haven't watched a ton of Williams. I've been focusing mostly on McDuffie and Snead. I haven't noticed him negatively in any way though, and I've noticed him positively multiple times. That's really that's really good news with your third corner. He obviously has done enough to leapfrog Watson to be third in that depth chart, and he was never going to pass up Snead and McDuffie. So that tells you that there's at least something there. I wouldn't know whether it was that good, but he's got incredible athleticism for his size. Great size. And if he's able to put together, and the Chiefs develop corners very well, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was able to develop from a solid starter to a really good player. And wouldn't that be incredible for the Chiefs to have three really good corners? And yeah, I mean, if your worst corner is Jalen Watson or your number 4 corner, that is an incredible boon to have on defense. We just saw with the Jets how valuable it is to have a cornerback group that is deep and really talented on the top end. It's part of why they gave the Chiefs problems. Main Street Communication says Seth Chase Claypool did not play on Sunday for the 0-4 Bears. Reports are he could be had for a 6th-round pick. First question, do you think the Chiefs should trade a 6th or 7th-round pick for Claypool? Could he help us now? He's 25, 2nd-round pick, average around 700 yards a season in Pittsburgh. He's not expensive. I generally have a view, especially after seeing everything that's happened with various players that have left Pittsburgh, is that if Mike Tomlin can't get through to you, you're probably the problem. And it's just 2 places in a row where he's really kind of tried to, his effort lacks on film. That's a huge red flag to me. And I think you got to be really careful with guys like that. In terms of talent, sure. I mean, they could really, I mean, he would be immediately at his peak, their best deep ball threat, and contested catch, go get it guy. The problem is he's not always at his best. And I'm just really leery about it. A guy who you can see lacks effort on film. That makes me really leery. Second question, have you ever been a did not participate or whatever it is, DNP at work? Has your boss ever given you the choice to stay at work or go home? No, I can't say that's, I mean, unless I'm sick, and then I usually just come to work. So I don't know, but I promise I've got my office door shut, and I'm not getting anyone else sick here. All right, great mailbag questions this week, you guys. I really appreciate it. It's going so there were so many good ones that we're 12 minutes in. So here's what I'm going to do right now. First things first, if you're interested in what I wrote about Travis Kelce last week, and we talked about this a little bit in the way that he adjusts his routes, I had just started writing about that. Really, go check out the Chief of the North newsletter, where I wrote about the way that he adjusts routes based on with sight adjustments the way nobody else does. That's one of the last things I wrote about last week. The thing I wrote about this week, first, following the game, I've only got one article up so far. Again, just not at 100%. I'll try to be better. Is Isiah Pacheco, and I just wrote about how he runs desperate. And I think everyone knows what I mean when I say that, even though it's kind of hard to describe. He just, as I said here, he runs like Trey Smith blocks. He really does just put everything he has into every single play. And I wrote about how Pacheco's ability to create yardage, whether it's through running like a madman, running through people, or having that extra gear to outrun Mosley here, as well as the corner. I think that's Ward. If you take 1/10 of a second off of this, he's caught. And it's a good play, but not a great play. And that's the thing about Isiah Pacheco. What I wrote about is that he's not just a run-angry running back. He also has good speed and good acceleration. And you can see the difference that makes in plays, taking a bad play to an okay play, an okay play to a good play to a great play. Those things matter in terms of just that 1/10 of a second. That's how close things get at the NFL level. What I'm working on right now, next, for the Chief of the North newsletter, a lot of people have talked about the wide receivers. Matt Lane over at KCSN did a nice job talking about some of the separation issues we're seeing. I'll talk about that a little bit shortly. But what I wanted to actually go into, and this is what you're seeing right now, by the way, this is like a preview of an article. So you're like getting deep into the Chief of the North newsletter stuff here. Here, why don't we just start this over again? I might also try videos this week instead of GIFs. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not a man of change. I don't handle change well, but I do know people appreciate the ability to pause videos. And that is really, really nice. Now, if only I knew a way to make them look prettier, but alas, can't teach an old dog new tricks. Even though Ryan's much better at this than me, somehow, despite being much, much, much older than I am. Hi, Ryan. So one of the things I noticed in watching the game, people were talking about the receivers a lot, but that wasn't really the only problem the offense had. Mahomes obviously had a mystifying day. I'll be writing about that later this week as well. But the offensive line had more flushes than what we were used to seeing. And one of the problems that they had on multiple snaps here, watch this stunter. I mean, just completely unblocked. And this was on 2nd and 8 as you're in the red zone there. And I mean, this is the kind of play where you're just like, what happened? How in the world does someone come that unblocked? Well, they're just executing a simple stunt here. You go up the field, 91 comes through, and Trey Smith just misses it. And so what I'm going to be writing about, man, it doesn't get any prettier, does it? And I mean, every time you watch it, it just now if that were a Chiefs stunt, we'd be sitting here calling it gorgeous. I'm going to write a little bit about the offensive line and some of the struggles they had against the Jets. After watching it, I initially thought that it was even more so against stunts and twists and gamesmanship, but also some of it was just the Jets have one of the closest things to Chris Jones in the NFL in Quinnen Williams, and he just won some snaps. They've also got some good edge rushers, and that sometimes you just lose. And it's just an interesting thing to note. And that, I think, we got a little time here, would bring me around to some points on the offense itself in general. A lot of people are worried about the offense. Here's just something to keep in mind. Everyone's talking about the Bills right now. This is a Jets team that played that Bills offense very strong. Zach Wilson happened to play the game of his life, and especially 2 different drives where he just looked incredible. It was awesome. Good for him. I would just note the Chiefs still put up 23 points, and the only reason it was 23 points and not – imagine how differently you'd feel if the final score were 30-20. The entire NFL world would treat that differently. But the difference between 30 and 20 was an intentional slide by Patrick Mahomes at the end of the game. That was the difference. And it's at least worth knowing what we should be reacting to, like what's real and what's not. So that's just something to keep in mind against a very, 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 very good, very talented and well-coached Jets defense. They still put up 23 in a game that I've told people I think was like a C- game from the offense. The receivers didn't all play particularly well. Most of them didn't, in fact. The game plan didn't seem really well suited to some of the things that they needed to do. Pacheco played well. The run blocking was pretty good, but it wasn't super consistent. You know, you had one big play and you had multiple good plays, but there were multiple plays that got stuffed too, which is part of the problem with the running game. So I wouldn't even say the running game had an A+ day or an A day, is maybe like a B+. On the passing game as a whole, Mahomes played one of the worst games he's played in a while. All of those things, and they still put up points against a really good defense. So I do think they've got a wide receiver issue. But I think that when you look at the things that like Rashee Rice has done in a small sample size, I think that they have some answers in-house. But I also think that it's a little early to hit the panic button in terms of that based on a 1-game sample size. That said, they definitely have not shown the ability to consistently separate against man coverage. And I assume you're going to see more and more of that, especially this week. The Vikings defensive coordinator loves to blitz, loves it. So you're probably going to be seeing a lot of man coverage, and this will be a chance for the Chiefs to show some of the other receivers, anyone besides Travis Kelce, to show out a bit. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what they do moving forward. I'm excited to see it. And I'm also exhausted because I still don't feel that well. So I think that's what we've got for you for the day. Thanks for all, as ever, your mailbag questions, for watching. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. You know, Ryan and the gang, they do great work here. I'm also here too, but I don't do as good a work as they do. So I appreciate all of you. And just keep in mind, it's a great week to be a Chiefs fan. Oh, again, I'll be in Minnesota. Plan on arriving. I'm always in Minnesota. I plan on arriving at the Chiefs-Vikings game. I want to get there a couple hours early, get in the stadium because I've never seen it before. I'll try to tweet out where I'm at more or less. If you want to come say hi, make me look like a big deal in front of my wife and my sister, that would be fun. But I sure hope I get a chance to say hi to some of you. I appreciate you guys as ever. And now I can say definitively it's a great week to be a Chiefs fan.